Hey, this is Matthew, and welcome back to Nerd News Today. And before we do this wrestling figure review, I just want to give my condolences to the family of Jonathan Huber, who a lot of wrestling fans will know better as Luke Harper from WWE and Brody Lee from AEW. I never had a chance to meet Jonathan during his time in the WWE or AEW, and I really looked forward to having that happen one day. He's always been one of my favorites, and I'm going to miss seeing him in action. I'm going to miss him in general, because I've heard a lot of great stories about the man. So I'd like to offer my own 10-bell salute to Jonathan Huber and say that you'll be missed very, very much. Now, as for this video and what we're looking at today, this time around we've got a pretty unique and new piece of wrestling merchandise that looks pretty retro. I've mentioned here before in this channel that I collect a lot of Japanese wrestling merchandise and especially a lot of Japanese wrestling figures. I tend to get a lot of those through eBay, through various stores and people that I know, and also from a guy on Instagram known as Junk Shop Dog. I found out about him through the Major Wrestling Figure podcast. I've bought plenty of stuff from this guy. He's been super trustworthy, really awesome, and I was super excited earlier this year when he announced he was doing his own action figure line. And today we've got that first entry in this new line, and that is Bruiser Brody done in the Sofubi style. So arguably the first pro wrestling toy ever made came out of Japan back in 1981, and that was the Sofubi Super Pro Wrestling line, or something like that. And that line consisted of figures that were essentially non-articulated, but done in the soft vinyl style. And I say non-articulated, they did have, like, basically the shoulders could go up and down, and I think the waist could turn. That was about it. They were made out of a soft vinyl, which makes them a little bit fragile. It makes them kind of interesting too, because a lot of times they were not the most perfect looking figures. They would always have a little bit of imperfections coming out of the mold, so they're pretty unique looking toys. And that first wave of Sofubi figures had some very notable wrestlers from the time, including Antonio Inoki, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, we had the Funks, we had Mil Mascaras, we had Andre the Giant, we had Abdul the Butcher, Stan Hansen, there was a few others as well. It wasn't a very big line, but they got pretty much the main guys at the time. So fast forward now to 2020, it's almost 40 years later, and now we've got Series 2, if you will. So Junk Shop Dog is basically continuing the lineage of those figures by doing his own soft vinyl figures, and he's starting off with one of the guys who didn't have a figure back then, which is a shock, but yeah, Bruiser Brody didn't get one back in 1981, so today, 2020, we finally got him. So let's go ahead, change the camera angle, and get a closer look at this figure from all angles. Okay, here's our Bruiser Brody now. It's time to take a closer look at this guy. Let's go ahead. Before we do anything, I just do want to spend a little more time about this packaging here. It is meant to look like the original Sofubi Pro Wrestling figures packaging, and that's a really nice little detail. Very happy he did that. It looks really excellent. I don't own any Popey figures, but I've seen lots of photos of them, and I'd say this is pretty darn close with one very major improvement. And by the way, just so you guys can see the back, there's nothing at all in the back, but, you know, that's fine. It doesn't really matter, because these are not really exactly ever meant to be shown from behind that much. I'm letting it fly this time just because, you know, this is a collector-style figure. That doesn't really matter. And it's also important to note there on the bottom, I know it might be a little bit hard to see, but it does say that this figure is approved by the Goodish family, so I just wanted to stress that and point that this is, again, a completely licensed figure and approved by the Goodish family, by the family of Bruiser Brody. So you should know that this has been given a thumbs up from the family, and that makes it pretty solid off the bat. So what is that one big improvement about the packaging that we didn't get to see with the original toys? Well, you're looking at it right now. This is beyond collector friendly, as I like to say. That comes right out there. Look at that. Boom, done. Bruiser Brody is now here. He's got two-part package holding him in, and there we go. Voila. There is Bruiser Brody. So this is legitimately my first time actually taking a look at this figure. I've seen the proto photos, I've seen all the photos JSD put up, but this is my first time in hand looking at it, because since I got it, I've actually been holding off and really spending a lot of time staring at it, because I wanted to make it more genuine for this review. But I have to say, I am really impressed with this. This is a really good looking toy on all fronts here. So let's start with that likeness. Does it look like Bruiser Brody? Hell yeah, it looks like Bruiser Brody. Nailed that look. And you know, the thing with the Sofubi figures is, again, they're highly stylized figures. There is an element of cartoonishness to them as well, an abstraction of the features, and this is one of those cases where those abstractions work in its favor. Nailed some real perfect points, totally reads like him, the expression is like him. This is great on all fronts here. And it's really cool too, as you can probably see it a little bit here. I'll take some better photos of it, but they actually got like the dents in his forehead from blading. He's got like all those little weird creases and things in his forehead. Some of that is actually going on to the toy there. That's really nice. I like that. There's some good texture in the hair and the beard as well. You can see from behind too. You guys know, if you've been here before, how much I like long hair and how it looks on toys, and I'm very picky about it. I think, again, considering this is meant to be a Sofubi style figure, that they totally got the hair in a good style. It looks legit. It looks authentic to what it's meant to represent from that time period. Body is also very good. Now, the thing with, I think, a lot of those Popey figures is that the bodies were kind of one note for the most part. Like, Abdul the Butcher had a different body. A few other guys had some different types of bodies, but for the most part, they were kind of just like the same body, more or less, with just some variations on them. And they all kind of like have this kind of V shape coming up as their body, like, tiny little legs, and the upper body just goes up like that and gets really big. Did the exact same thing here as well, and it works. It looks good. It's going to totally fit in with any Popey figures that you have, or most likely for most of you out there, any Popey figures that you don't have. In terms of articulation, we'll talk about that a little bit, but there really isn't going to be much here. This is like a typical Cara Pro figure, or I guess a Popey figure in this case too. So the arms can go up and down, that's about it. I don't think the waist turns. It looks like it should turn, but I don't think it does. I think the waist looks like it's kind of solid in there. So yeah, you get 2 points of articulation, possibly a third, but these are not meant to be played with. These are meant to be displayed, and they're meant to represent an older figure. And a lot of those Japanese style vinyl figures don't really have much articulation. I own a lot of other things as well besides Japanese pro wrestling toys. I got some Godzillas, I've got some Ultraman figures, and most of those usually also have 2 or 3 points. And that's going to be both arms typically, that's usually a guaranteed one, and then maybe a waist will turn, but in many cases it doesn't. So considering what this is meant to represent, articulation, I'm not even going to consider that really a factor in this equation here, but it's worth noting. The paint job is very, very clean. I see no slop on this figure really anywhere, or at least nothing really worth mentioning. And, we're talking about some black and white tones going on here. There's high chances for that to be messed up. I mean, I could nitpick about like that line there, but who cares? That's really very, very minimal. It's totally not worth pointing out. It's overall just a very clean, solid paint job. And again, talking about details here, we've got that classic gray knee pad he's got on. We see the athletic socks that he would wear in that time period, and the fuzzy boots are represented as well. I think this is a very, very excellent representation of Bruiser Brody in this Sofubi style. Really no complaints, just very excited. And by the way, since I've got a few figures here, let's just bring in some Cara Pro figures I've got just to see how it scales up in comparison. So there is an Antonio Inoki figure, which might not be the best because it's got Inoki's terrible posture, but let's go ahead and put him next to Masakatsu Funaki, another figure that might also not be the best choice because he's also kind of hunched over. But okay, if that's not working out, well, let's pull Funaki, let's throw in a Jumbo Saruda and see how he looks. So yeah, there you go, looks pretty solid, more or less in the same scale. So if you're collecting any of these Japanese figures, they're gonna all be in the same height, and that's a good thing. So to summarize what I've just said here, no complaints really, beautiful figure, excellent work here, high quality. And we do need to talk a little bit about this plastic also, because I didn't really mention that much. This is a softer plastic. I think also this is a hollow figure, you can kind of hear that maybe. So, different type of plastic, different type of look. This is more of an artsy figure in some ways because of that. It's kind of funny to consider that, but it actually is. That's kind of the cool thing about this figure, is that it is a pro wrestling figure, but it's also really technically an art toy in a lot of ways. And since I collect some of those things too, I'm even more happy to add this into my collection. So the Bruiser Brody we looked at today cost $30 on Junk Shop Dog's website, not including shipping. Shipping was about $10 for me to get it shipped from Australia to the US for a total of 40 bucks. However, Junk Shop Dog also has a special limited edition version of this Bruiser Brody in chain metal gray, I believe he called it. It's basically this exact figure here, but done in all silver. That figure will cost you 50 bucks plus shipping, so ultimately probably about 60 bucks. And I gotta tell you, that's a super affordable price for this kind of thing. I can tell you, I've basically paid that range in US for domestic items I've gotten at places like Toy Tokyo and other stores that sell this type of Sofubi or soft vinyl figure. So considering the quality, considering the price point, considering where they're coming from, yeah, Junk Shop Dog is giving you a hell of a bargain here. And with more figures planned, I think you definitely want to jump on this first one before it sells out, because it's a really great one. And this line is going to have some legs, I think, for days. So I look forward to checking out more of them as the line grows. So that's our look at Bruiser Brody from Junk Shop Dog, Series 2 of Sofubi Pro Wrestling figures, and I cannot wait to see what he does next. And as of now, he has already announced that there's not just one, not just two, but 3 more figures coming out in this wave. I assume they're all going to be licensed as well. And as of now, one of the people that he's doing is someone who hasn't ever been made in figure form at all before. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say these are going to all be retro wrestlers, but hey, he might go into new guys as well. We'll see how this line progresses. And for my money, I personally want to see a version of Big Van Vader, because he would be great to have in this form. There's a lot of guys who could be really cool, very interesting to have, so I'm really excited for this line. They're really good looking figures. They're really good figures in general. Price is also really good, so I cannot recommend these enough. So if you want to check out this figure and any other merchandise that JSD has on his website, go to junkshopdog.com or follow him on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And that's also where he does a lot of his sales. So you can pick up Cara Pro figures, How figures, mini big heads, all sorts of Japanese wrestling toys at a very reasonable price. If you want to get into Japanese wrestling toys, I think he is the best gateway for it, probably better even than most eBay prices. And that's saying a lot considering he's off in Australia selling these toys to us. So yeah, I definitely recommend you guys check out JSD if you want to get started on Japanese wrestling toys. And one last note, this is actually kind of perfect timing having this figure arrive just now, because I've got a pretty interesting announcement here. So you guys know that every Monday for the past few years, we've always had some kind of pro wrestling figure review happening on the website. This time around, I'm happy to say that, well, starting next Monday, we're going to start looking at Japanese pro wrestling figures. And a lot of those, in fact, did come from Junk Shop Dog and other sources I mentioned at the start of this video. I've been collecting Japanese wrestling figures on and off for many, many years, and in the past 2 years or so, I got really a lot heavier into the line. So I've got a pretty nice collection. I'm going to share a few of them with you, and we'll see how things go. They're going to be pretty different from what you're used to seeing with, let's say, the AEW figures or the Mattel Elite figures. Japanese wrestling figures, they tend to be, a little bit more in this style, a lot less articulation, just very different look overall. So I'm curious to see how you guys are going to react to them. I hope you guys are going to like the history lessons that are attached to each of those figure reviews to kind of give you some more context to the pro wrestling and what was going on in Japan at the time. And it's going to be cool just to look at something a little bit different for a change. So yeah, I hope you guys are going to like the pro wrestling figure reviews coming out next year, starting on January 4th. And whose action figure are we going to be spotlighting first in this new Japanese wrestling figure review series? Well, tune in on Monday to find out. So until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today, and keep that fighting spirit burning.